Welcome to the Walk Around Podcast. Our goal is to share with you the insights, the skills, the processes, and the leaders that are influencing the retail automotive landscape today. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Funch, and as always, joined by Danny Vendrell. Hey, Danny.
How's it going, Nick?
Going great. Another week in the books. Super excited about today's guest, though, Michelle.
Definitely.
Yeah, Michelle DiTondo is a principal with Avion Consulting. She has 25 years of experience in human resources leadership and organizational transformation. She served nearly a decade as the Chief Human Resources Officer for MGM Resorts International, leading culture transformation and employee engagement initiatives for the company's 88,000, let me say that again, 88,000 employees worldwide. As an executive coach, Michelle has provided support and guidance and leadership development both internally and externally. Her coaching practice has continued to focus on senior level leaders in large organizations working to develop their executive presence, leadership style, and strategic thinking skills. Michelle received her Bachelor of Arts degree in education from Arizona State and her MBA from BYU. She resides in Las Vegas, Nevada, with her husband and 2 children. She has board positions with the Culinary Training Academy, Asian American Pacific Islander Scholarship Fund, and the Red Cross of Southern Nevada. Currently, she is on the board of LeaderMom.com and focused on creating resources for women and mothers in leadership roles. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're excited to take a little bit of a walk around leadership and transformation and all that goes into that. As we get started, maybe a little background. I know I touched on it briefly, but a little background on kind of what led you to the HR space in general.
Well, I always had a passion for teaching, which is why my bachelor's degree is in secondary education. I had plans to be a high school teacher, and the way things just happened, my first job offer out of Arizona State was in human resources. And so spent a career just going through progressively more responsible roles through financial services. And being from Las Vegas, I was very intent on not working in hospitality. Yeah. And, all roads led me back to home and ended up just by chance joining Caesars Entertainment as a head of HR at the Flamingo, which is classic Las Vegas destination. Yeah. And in 2006, went to MGM Resorts at New York Hotel and Casino as a head of HR. Spent a couple years there, and at Mandalay Bay as a head of HR at Mandalay Bay before going into the corporate role and being the head of human resources for the last 9.5 or so years.
So almost a decade. I'm sure you've got many stories to tell through the human resources space. But I guess I'd like to focus our time today on kind of leading through disruption. And almost 3 years ago, well, by the time this airs, probably over 3 years ago, MGM was disrupted significantly through the shooting, and you were at the helm there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was, I think of a life-changing experience. My colleagues and I going through that day, and then just the healing and the recovery of our company and our city after that, I think was definitely life-changing. It's something I'll never forget as both, just a time of great tragedy and anxiety, but also seeing how people and my colleagues and our employees came together to really drive the recovery of Las Vegas. It was a tragic and incredible time just to see how people come together.
Yeah, I think in all great tragedies, there's strengths that come through the other side of it. But as you think back to those kind of days immediately after, how did you prioritize, or were there certain things that you prioritized to try to get your team, kind of those team members on the front lines, through that?
I think if there was a common thing, I think, I'd probably emphasize 2 things. One, all of, our kind of rules and policies and precedent and all of those things went out the window because we really had to, it was a situation that there was no one to turn to who could have provided guidance on how you deal with something like that. None of us, we ran hotels and casinos and human resources. We weren't trained for this. There isn't a handbook. And when you work in an environment with 88,000 employees, but 90% of our employees are hourly. So we had lots of policies, procedures, union contracts, things like that. Those all had to kind of take a back seat to just doing the thing for people. So I would say one, flexibility, adaptability were incredibly important during that aftermath. The other thing was constant communication. It was a time where there was a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of grief, that, we're kind of creating process and rules daily as we went. We're deciding how to respond to things just kind of on the fly, 24 hours a day. But the one thing I think we did really well was constantly communicate to the leaders at each of our property, to all the HR leaders who were then responsible for communicating to employees. We had multiple conference calls with everyone all day long, and the leaders clearly understood their job was to get messages out to their employees.
It's interesting. Those two kind of strategies probably play a lot in kind of what we dealt with through this COVID pandemic as well. Number one, doing the right thing by the employee or the associate. Number two,
Right.
kind of communicating. And I would kind of it's interesting that you don't plan for those things. To your point, there's no playbook on how to deal with tragedy when it strikes or disruption when it strikes. But how, and I guess this is a rhetorical question, but how do you build in some foundational characteristics that enable you to navigate those things when you go through? It's interesting to me.
Yeah, and a lot of it was, driven by our chairman, who is like, which I think is similar to the JM family culture too. People come first, and I think throughout this thing, we kind of asked ourselves, starting at the senior leadership, did what we were going to do, did it feel right? Was it the right thing for employees who are impacted? And I'll give you an example, which definitely applies to the pandemic, the current situation. People who weren't able to return to work because they were anxious or fearful, do we pay them or not? Do we cover their benefits? Do we give them funds, which we did, all of these things, but do you give them additional funds to help cover expenses like groceries or rent because they have so much fear and anxiety that they're not ready to come back to work? Those are things that there are no guidelines or precedent to do that, but you know what the right decision is, and that has to guide you whether or not it feels like the right thing to do.
And so that's kind of the guiding light when you're dealing with disruption. But kind of leading a team really of 88,000 people, communication's critical there as well, right?
Yes, for sure.
And how do you, when you think about the alignment and aligning kind of vision, mission, strategy throughout all those levels, how did you go about cascading that throughout the team?
One thing that was important to us, which I think applies to all businesses, is that, or all organization, is that leaders have to get really good at telling a story. And, I've called it a compelling vision. So, I think our employee population at MGM Resorts was very diverse. So, we had senior level executives in all of those traditional corporate areas like marketing and finance and accounting and analytics. But we also had the majority of our employees were housekeepers and blackjack dealers and bartenders. So, whatever we did from a communication engagement standpoint had to apply to a wide range of employees, different languages and different backgrounds. And I think the thing that resonates with all people is a story that gets them excited about the future. So, I think companies tend to rely too much on statements that are on the wall or on, giant PowerPoint decks to explain things to employees. And I think if you get a leader to do a really good job at saying, if we do this, this is what the future will look like for us in a way like they would talk to a friend at a dinner table, versus going through a PowerPoint deck that talked about the ROI on a project. We really focused on telling stories and making sure that our leaders could tell the story about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what it would look like at the end. We deployed this when we were going through a organization restructure where we're changing how our leadership was structured, making some decisions around expenses and things like that. But the first thing we did was made sure that everyone knew how to tell the story. And I think that applies now as well. If leaders can talk about, there are some good things coming out of the COVID crisis. Companies are being innovative. Many companies have advanced their digital platform years over the last several months. So if leaders can talk about, we've been through this crisis, but this is what it's going to look like at the end and why we're excited, I think then you kind of get everyone on board and engaged with serving your customer or engaging with clients or whatever your organization's purpose is. But stories, I think, are much more effective than memos and PowerPoint decks and signs on a wall.
And as you think back, or interjecting optimism is critical, right? I think it's easy, or I find myself, it's easy to focus on what's not going right or the challenges, but interjecting kind of that optimism into those stories, I think, is just as critical. How do you do that though, or how did you focus on it as a leader in interjecting authenticity into that message? Because I do agree, you get the PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint, nobody wants to do that. But there's also this, here's kind of the line the company is serving. How do you bake some authenticity into that throughout so the leaders can kind of put their spin and why they provide value into it? Did you structure that for the leadership, or?
We actually did. So we structured kind of the high level. These are the things that you need to deliver. These are the messages you need to get across. But how you do that is, you should be authentic to your own personality, use your own words. One of the things that we did, which I thought was very effective, was we went through a whole culture and brand transformation. And when we launched that, prior to launching the brand, we said, we need to be able to deliver on the brand. And part of that was making sure that our employees felt the brand. They felt like they were ready to deliver it. So we did 18 months of work on culture. Part of that was making sure that our leaders understood their role. They understood how to treat employees in the organization. And essentially the message was treat our employees like our best customers. So when we had a series of leadership training classes, when we did launch those training classes, we didn't have HR training in front of the room. We had all of our senior business unit leaders and presidents, which we had to scale them up so they all felt comfortable, because some were introverted than others. People loved hearing their stories, their experience, their advice and guidance. It was 100 times more effective than having a training specialist up there delivering the same content. So, I think a key learning for us was that our leaders of people in the organization, leaders of the business unit, are the best people to train, because they're respected. They have great stories. They have great examples. And in organizations, employees love to hear about what their leaders have learned in their journey.
So it's interesting. I think that just thinking of myself, my own experience in sales, I've sat in many a class where it's that can't teach, or there's some version of that saying. But when you get the people that can do it, teaching the class, it's that's where the magic happens.
Absolutely.
Because there's that respect factor. There's all of those things kind of come into play there. And P.S., they're seeing the result of the hard work, right? Through the leader.
And I think you asked how we built authenticity into that message. So we partnered them with an HR leader who they were really kind of their coach. And, they practiced the delivery. They gave them some guidance, but it was really important for us that they were authentic and used their own personality, because, if you think about people who work in dealerships, you were saying before we got on the call that there are a lot of personalities. There are really a lot of personalities in people that run casinos. So we wanted to, everyone wanted to see their personality in that content as well.
I can only
that conversation, that conversation around culture and brand, I think is really relevant right now to the dealer body, especially with, and it's just a conversation we've had in the past too, where, everyone's kind of selling the same car. Everyone's got the same Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla, whatever that may be. And your brand is really the differentiator. That's the reason why someone may choose you and may decide to come back and refer their friends to go back to your dealership. And I think I love that point on when you look at a brand, what's the culture that's behind that? And then ultimately, who are the people that are behind that? They're true, authentic selves, and letting that be kind of the storyteller. I think that has a lot of themes that could really resonate with the dealer body too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole service profit chain, just how you build loyalty with customers, all of that is also around emotion too. So how people feel when they go into, whether it's their dry cleaner, their bank, their dealership, how they feel really drives whether or not they're going to come back and refer other people. So there's a huge business case around making sure that your culture aligns with your brand or whatever you're promising to. And the interesting thing about dealers is that in most cities, people know who the dealers are because they are also, they're big personalities that you see on TV. And so there's a personality behind that dealership that, whether it's family oriented or it's fun or it's that has to be delivered by every employee when the customer walks through the door.
Well, I think you've got to back up what you sell, right? Or what you're saying. Those big personalities, you have to experience the same thing. And I'm reminded, I think, of that discussion of I guess it's psychology, right? Is no one remembers what you say. They remember how you made them feel. And whether you're supervising a team, whether you're selling a widget, any of those things, it's about kind of connecting and with the feelings of the people that you're interacting with. Right. But Michelle, you had some experience, I think, helping to align a brand and a culture. What was the driver of that, or what are some of the things that you learned through that process?
So the driver, and I love telling this story because it's a great story for an HR professional, how HR really helped to drive business results. So we had a new chief marketing officer, and she was kind of charged with revitalizing the brand or launching a new brand for MGM Resorts, where previously every property had its own brand. Bellagio, MGM Grand, Mandalay Bay all had their own marketing campaigns, used their own ad agencies, and she was charged with kind of creating a brand and a marketing campaign for MGM Resorts. So her team worked to do that. When they presented it, it's called Welcome to the Show. It's online. It's exciting. When you see it, you want to hop on a plane and go to Las Vegas and have that whole Vegas experience because it's so exciting and really highlighted everything that was great about all of our properties under that MGM Resorts umbrella. The problem was the first time we watched the video, everyone was so excited. They wanted to see it, during NFL games and commercials. Everybody wanted to see it everywhere. And the problem was that we kind of felt like our company wasn't ready to deliver on that brand. So if we show you all the excitement of restaurants and the spa and entertainment at Bellagio, and when you get there, you feel like you're at the DMV. I mean, that's going to be failing on the brand promise. So, we felt like if we were going to put this big statement out there about how much fun you can have in Las Vegas and throughout our company, but particularly in Las Vegas where we have 50,000 employees, that when someone got into the building, they had to feel that brand. So she and I worked together to say, okay, it's not time yet. This is what it will be, but here's what we need to do. And we spent about 18 months working on the culture and service standards, making sure those are consistent across the company. Again, going back to emotion, what we taught our employees and our leaders was that not the process of checking in quickly, but the emotion around it. So if you had an opportunity, in the language we use, if you had an opportunity to wow someone, you needed to take that opportunity, because a wow is what you remember when the Fort Lauderdale check-in happened fine. I got to my room on time. You remembered that, and one of our stories that we shared was after we launched all of this, one of our front desk managers in the note in check-in that they requested a rubber duck to be put into their room. And in Las Vegas, that's probably mild for requests that we would get. They wanted a rubber to be put into their room. So the manager, putting it in would be a wow in itself, but the manager took it upon himself to find a rubber duck, picked up a rubber duck on a tour and took a picture of the duck in the spa with a little towel wrapped around its head, and then a picture of it at a roulette wheel, and a picture of it in a chair by the pool. And so this duck had a whole journey that they laid out all the pictures for the guest and then set the duck there like the duck had already been on his own Vegas vacation. So the guest was so overwhelmed and impressed by that they wrote this long letter, and that became one of the stories we told around how do you take one little action, probably 15 minutes to a half hour of his time to really wow a customer, created that memory that someone probably told 10, 20 friends when they got home that talked about that experience at Bellagio that was consistent with the brand. So,
well, I have to say, the only time I've ever felt like I'm at the DMV in Las Vegas is in the morning, right? When the curtains open up. But no, that's, I think it's important, right? Because you can, to your point, check-in was fine versus, and it doesn't have to be a rubber ducky that goes on a tour of Las Vegas or the tour of the property, right? A bottle of water with a smile goes a long way with somebody that just got off a cross-country flight. And I think if I'm reflecting on my own business, how can I kind of interject some of those bottle of water moments into my interactions with customers? So pivoting, I think just a bit, how do you, the pandemic has impacted, a large everyone, right? No one's gone kind of unscathed, whether through work or personally. How do you kind of anchor towards optimism throughout that, whether it's personally or professionally? What are some strategies that, anyone can use?
I think being intentional about thinking about things that create a feeling of optimism. So, I know and I think this applies personally and professionally, just along with the pandemic, everything that's in the news that drives stress and anxiety, whether it's like financial markets, the upcoming election, there's a ton of things that make everybody worry about a bunch of different things. So, one of the things that I learned from a friend of mine, one simple thing, like once a day, thinking about what was the best moment of today. And I tried it with my kids. I have a 16 and a 14-year-old. And if you have teenagers, you would know they really don't want to talk to their parents about anything. But, but if I'd asked the question, how was school today? I just get, especially from my 16-year-old son, I get a one word, it was good. But I tried asking both of them, I said, what was the best moment of the day? And while my 16-year-old son's best moment was lunch, he did go on and on about what he had for lunch, which I appreciated. My daughter had something much more, I think, emotional. She talked about, because she's new to the school this year, and so she talked about making a friend and, how good it felt to make a friend with someone in her first few days of school. But they talked about something, and you could see their facial expression change when they were talking about it versus just, kind of, how you doing today? Good. And moving on. Getting them to intentionally think about what was really good, because every day has something good, whether it was, no one was in line in front of you at Starbucks drive-through. That's a really good moment. That's a great moment. Makes you feel better than you did before you thought of it. So that was one thing, was at least once a day, like at the end of each day, thinking about and really remembering what was the best moment of today. The other thing is, there's a ton of research that shows if you express gratitude or thank someone else, that builds a more positive, more optimistic feeling. So having a practice of whether, and I've done this recently on LinkedIn, people that I used to work with, or, colleagues that you have now, sending a message, sending a text, even calling them and just thanking them for something that they did for you makes you feel more positive and optimistic. There are a couple things like that that are really simple, but they're intentional. I'm going to do this once a day. And it does help. You could try it with, if you have a team of people, start the meeting off if you have a team meeting, or at MGM Resorts, we would have what we called a pre-shift. Everybody kind of gathers around, you talk about what's going on that day, who's checking in, who's checking out. If you have a huddle like that, having a topic like what's the best moment of today, or what are you most proud of that happened in the last week, or what are you most proud of that happened yesterday, and having people go around the room and say one sentence is something that you could feel the mood change when you do something like that.
I love both of those things, kind of, because it's twofold. One, I think if you're asking the question, you get to learn, but when you're responding to the question, you find that kind of focus in the moment. And then the gratitude piece is just as critical, because I think it helps bring that to life for others as well. So I guess similar story. I ask my daughters at dinner every night, who'd you eat lunch with today? Like trying to get conversation more than how did your day go? And it took me about 3 days to figure out they have assigned seating now. It's cool. I was like, are you with the same person every day, huh? Dad,
that's funny.
We have assigned seating these days. Michelle, I'm curious. I guess probably I am curious about a lot of different things, but I think that's probably a good bow to put on our conversation today around the best moment of the day and practicing gratitude. There's a couple different things I'll take out of this conversation for certain. Number one is the importance of doing the right thing for everyone, including your direct team members. Number two is the importance of communication and how during times of great stress, if you build those kind of two muscles around doing the right things and communicating authentically, it will help you navigate those stressful times. And the more you can do it by telling a story through compelling vision, I think, as you put it, the more impactful it'll be for everyone. So thank you for your time today. This has been beneficial. I'm certain our listeners will find some value there. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to like it, share it on your favorite platforms, and don't forget to rate us too. So, Michelle, where can our listeners find you? I think you're on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and my name's Michelle. My maiden name is Bray, Bray, DiTondo on LinkedIn.
And we'll make sure to share a link in our comments. So thank you for your time today, and best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.